The blood-soaked bandana wrapped around Cordelia Dawson's trembling hand told a story of desperation that matched the wildness in her eyes as she stumbled through the doors of Hillsborough's only saloon, silencing every patron inside. New Mexico Territory, 1876. The mining town of Hillsborough hummed with the usual activity of a Friday evening. Men fresh from the mines or surrounding ranches crowded the weathered bar, seeking respite from the week's toil in whiskey glasses and card games. The piano player in the corner hammered out a cheerful tune that clashed with the tension that now filled the room. Cordelia hadn't planned on entering a saloon, especially not one filled with men whose hungry gazes made her skin crawl, but the bleeding wouldn't stop, and she had nowhere else to go. Her dress, once a respectable shade of blue, now bore the dust and grime of 3 days on the run. Her auburn hair, falling from its pins in tangled waves, framed a face that might have been pretty if not for the bruise blooming along her left cheekbone and the hollow fear in her green eyes. "I need help," she managed, her voice barely carrying across the suddenly silent room. No one moved. No one except the tall figure at the far end of the bar who set down his whiskey and turned to face her. Xavier Kincaid didn't consider himself a hero by any stretch of the imagination. At 32, he'd seen enough of the West to know that heroes often ended up dead, their noble intentions buried alongside them in unmarked graves. But something in the woman's desperate stance stirred something long dormant inside him. "Miss." His voice carried the slight drawl of his Texas upbringing as he approached her carefully, as one might a spooked horse. "You're hurt." "I can't pay," Cordelia whispered, swaying slightly, "but I can work." "I can clean or cook, or let's worry about that bleeding first," Xavier interrupted, noticing how the red stain on the bandana was spreading. He turned to the barkeep. "Joe, you still got that doctor staying in the back room?" The barkeep nodded, already moving to fetch the physician who'd been playing cards in the back. Xavier gently guided Cordelia to a chair, mindful not to touch her more than necessary. Her skittishness told him plenty about what she might be running from. "Name's Xavier Kincaid," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Most folks call me X. I run the Broken Spur Ranch just north of town." Cordelia's eyes darted around the room, assessing each face for threats. "Cordelia Dawson," she finally replied, her voice barely audible. "I was heading to Silver City. My aunt lives there." The lie slipped easily from her lips, practiced over the past 72 hours of running. Xavier didn't call her on it. Every person in the West carried secrets, some were just fresher than others, doctor. Peterson arrived, his spectacles perched on his nose and medical bag in hand. "Let's have a look at that hand, miss." As the doctor unwrapped the bloody bandana, Xavier noted the deep gash across Cordelia's palm. "Knife wound," the doctor muttered, too low for the onlookers to hear, but Xavier caught it. "The injury wasn't accidental. She'll need stitches," Peterson announced, "and somewhere quiet to rest." "I'll pay for a room at the boarding house," Xavier said, already reaching for his wallet. "No." Cordelia protested, trying to stand. "I don't deserve, I can't accept. It's just a room, Miss Dawson," Xavier said firmly. "Nothing more, nothing less. You can repay me when you're healed up if it troubles your conscience." Something in his calm certainty made Cordelia relent. The doctor worked quickly, stitching the wound with practiced hands while Xavier stood nearby, his broad-shouldered frame blocking the curious stares of the other patrons. "I don't deserve kindness," she said softly, wincing as the needle pierced her skin. Xavier's blue eyes met hers. "Everybody deserves kindness, Miss Dawson, even those who think they don't." He couldn't have known then how those simple words would change both their lives, or how proving her wrong would become the most important thing he'd ever done. After the doctor finished, Xavier escorted Cordelia to the boarding house, maintaining a respectful distance. Mrs. Jenkins, the plump widow who ran the establishment, took one look at Cordelia's battered appearance and ushered her inside with maternal concern. "You need a bath and a good meal, child," Mrs. Jenkins said, already heating water. "And don't you worry about Mr. Kincaid here, he's one of the decent ones." Xavier tipped his hat. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Dawson. Rest easy." As he walked back toward the hitching post where his bay gelding waited patiently, Sheriff Morales stepped from the shadows of the jailhouse across the street. "That's a complication you don't need, X," the lawman said, striking a match against the wall to light his cigarette. "Just helping someone in need, Thomas, nothing more." The sheriff exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Telegraph came through from Albuquerque this afternoon, looking for a woman matching her description, something about a dead husband." Xavier's expression remained neutral, though his mind raced. "That's so." "Says she killed him, stabbed him while he slept." Morales studied Xavier's face. "I'm giving you the courtesy of this conversation because you've done right by this town, but if she's who they're looking for, I'll have to take her in." "You sure the Telegraph had the right information?" "Wouldn't be the first time a story got twisted between tellings," Morales shrugged. "I know what I read, just thought you should know before you get too invested in playing the hero." Xavier nodded, untying his horse. "Appreciate the warning. Good night, Sheriff." As he rode the 3 miles back to his ranch under the star-filled sky, Xavier's thoughts remained on the frightened woman with the wounded hand. He'd seen plenty of desperate people in his years, first as a Union soldier, then as a Texas Ranger, and finally as a rancher carving out his place in the harsh New Mexico territory. Cordelia Dawson wasn't the first fugitive he'd encountered, but something in her eyes spoke of pain rather than malice. The broken spur came into view, its main house and barn silhouetted against the moon-washed landscape. It wasn't the biggest spread in the territory, but Xavier had built it from nothing after the war, and pride swelled in his chest whenever he returned home. His foreman, Miguel Ortiz, waited on the porch, rifle across his knees. "Riders came by," Miguel said as Xavier dismounted. "3 men asking questions about a woman. When, couple hours ago, said they were family looking for their sister who'd run off. I told them we hadn't seen any women out this way in weeks." Miguel's dark eyes narrowed. They didn't have the look of concerned brothers, Patron. Xavier nodded, unsurprised. "If they come back, keep telling them the same. I'll be heading into town again tomorrow." Morning arrived with the golden light typical of New Mexico autumns. Xavier completed his ranch chores early, leaving Miguel in charge before riding back to Hillsboro. He found Cordelia in Mrs. Jenkins' kitchen, her bandaged hand cradled against her chest as she awkwardly tried to help knead dough with her good hand. "Miss Dawson," he greeted, removing his hat. "Glad to see you're up and about." Cleaned up and rested, Cordelia was indeed a beautiful woman. Her auburn hair had been neatly braided, and without the grime of travel, her skin had a natural glow despite the fading bruise, but the wariness remained in her eyes. "Mr. Kincaid, I was hoping you'd come by. I need to repay you for the doctor and the room." "No hurry on that," Xavier said, accepting the coffee Mrs. Jenkins offered. "How's the hand?" "Painful, but the doctor said it's clean. No infection." She hesitated. "I need to leave today for Silver City." Mrs. Jenkins exchanged a glance with Xavier. "Child, you're in no condition to travel." "That hand needs rest." "I can't stay," Cordelia insisted, her voice rising slightly. "It's not safe, I mean. I've imposed enough." Xavier sipped his coffee, considering his words carefully. "Miss Dawson, I suspect you're running from something or someone. I'm not asking for details. But Hillsboro might be safer than the road right now. The sheriff knows, doesn't he?" Cordelia's voice dropped to a whisper. "He received a telegraph." "Yes." Her face paled. "Then I definitely need to leave. Or you could tell me your side of the story and we could figure this out together." Cordelia's laugh held no humor. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. Let's just say I've seen enough in this life to know that official reports don't always tell the whole truth." Xavier leaned forward. "I'm offering help, Miss Dawson, nothing more. I don't deserve kindness." "So you said," Xavier's blue eyes held her steadily, "but that doesn't make it true." After a long moment, Cordelia nodded slowly. "Not here, somewhere private." Xavier took her to the small church at the edge of town, empty on a Saturday morning. They sat in the last pew, the colored light from the modest stained glass windows casting patterns across the wooden floor. "My husband was Edward Dawson," Cordelia began, her voice flat, "a businessman from Albuquerque. When I married him at 19, I thought I was the luckiest girl in the territory. My parents had died in a fever outbreak the year before, leaving me with few options. Edward was handsome, wealthy, and seemed kind. Xavier listened silently as she continued. The kindness lasted until our wedding night. The first beating came because I was inexperienced. After that, there was always a reason. Dinner was cold. I spoke to a male shopkeeper too familiarly. I bought the wrong kind of tobacco. Her fingers absently traced the scar on her cheek. This was from a broken whiskey bottle. That was last winter. Why didn't you leave sooner? Xavier asked, though he knew such situations were rarely simple. He kept all the money, monitored my every movement, and he had friends, powerful friends in business and in the law. Cordelia's voice hardened. 3 nights ago, he came home drunk, angrier than usual. He had a knife. Said he was tired of me, that he'd found someone younger, prettier, that he'd make sure no one would want what was left of me. She held up her bandaged hand. I got this trying to stop him from cutting my face again. We struggled, and somehow, the knife ended up in his chest. Self-defense, Xavier said firmly. Try explaining that when your husband's brother is the deputy marshal. Ellis Dawson arrived while I was still standing over Edward's body. He didn't even let me speak before he was shouting that I'd murdered his brother. I ran. Took nothing but the clothes I was wearing and whatever money I could grab from Edward's desk. Xavier processed her story, recognizing the ring of truth in it. The men looking for you, one of them would be Ellis Dawson, Cordelia nodded. Ellis and probably Edward's business associates, the Blackburn brothers. They're dangerous men, Mr. Kincaid. You should stay clear of me. Call me X, he said. And I've handled dangerous men before. You believe me then? Hope flickered in her eyes for the first time. I do, and I think I can help, but you'll need to trust me. Why would you do this? You could be charged as an accomplice. Xavier smiled slightly. Let's just say I've got some experience with the law myself. Former Texas Ranger. Relief flooded Cordelia's face, followed quickly by doubt. I still don't understand why you'd risk helping me. Maybe I've seen too many people get swept aside by men with power and money. Maybe I believe everyone deserves a chance at justice. He stood, offering her his hand. Or maybe I just can't stand seeing a lady in distress. Will you trust me? After a moment's hesitation, Cordelia placed her unbandaged hand in his. I don't have many options, do I? More than you might think, Xavier replied. First, we need to get you somewhere safer than the boarding house. My ranch is outside town, harder for unexpected visitors to approach unnoticed. That would look improper, Xavier's laugh surprised her. Miss Dawson, you're running from a murder charge. I think propriety might be the least of your concerns. Besides, my housekeeper, Mrs. Ortiz, lives on the property with her husband, my foreman. Your reputation will survive. She conceded with a nod. What's your plan? First, we need evidence of your husband's abuse, witnesses, doctor's records, anything that supports your claim of self-defense. Second, we need to establish the pattern of corruption involving your brother-in-law. If we can prove he's abused his position before, it strengthens your case. And how do we do that while I'm hiding at your ranch? Xavier smiled. I've got friends in useful places, former rangers who owe me favors. The telegraph operator in Hillsborough is one of them. They left the church separately, Xavier first, then Cordelia a few minutes later. He arranged for her few belongings to be brought from the boarding house while he purchased supplies and spoke quietly with the telegraph operator. By mid-afternoon, they were riding toward the broken spur, Xavier on his bay gelding and Cordelia on a gentle mare borrowed from the livery. The bruising on her face stood out starkly in the sunlight, and Xavier found his jaw tightening at the thought of the man who'd inflicted such pain. It's beautiful out here, Cordelia commented as they rode, the vast landscape of scrubby plains and distant mountains spreading around them. So open. That's why I chose it, Xavier replied. After the war and my time with the Rangers, I wanted space to breathe, room to see trouble coming. The war you fought, Union sighed, enlisted at 17, right at the end, saw enough to last a lifetime. Cordelia studied his profile. Is that why you became a ranger afterward? Xavier shrugged. Seemed like the right thing at the time, had skills with a gun and tracking, figured I might as well put them to good use. And now you're a rancher. Now I'm a rancher, he agreed. Been at it 8 years. Started with 20 head of cattle in that broken-down cabin. He pointed to a small structure near a creek. Now I've got 300 head, 12 good horses, and a proper house. You built all this yourself, had help, Miguel and his family, a few hands who come and go with the seasons. But yes, mostly by my own sweat. Cordelia fell silent, contemplating. I've never built anything, she finally said. I went from my parents' home to Edward's, never had the chance. Never too late to start, Xavier replied. As they crested a small rise, the ranch house came into full view, a sturdy, 2-story structure with a wide porch and corrals nearby. It wasn't grand by Eastern standards, but in the New Mexico territory, it represented significant accomplishment. Miguel Ortiz stood waiting, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Xavier. The smile turned curious when he noticed Cordelia. Miguel, this is Miss Dawson, Xavier introduced them. She'll be staying with us for a while, family trouble. The Mexican foreman nodded, understanding immediately. My wife has prepared the guest room, patron, and there were more riders asking questions in town. Sheriff Morales sent word. Xavier helped Cordelia dismount, steadying her when she winced from the pressure on her injured hand. Let's get you settled then. We've got some planning to do. That evening, after a simple but hearty dinner prepared by Mrs. Ortiz, Xavier and Cordelia sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains in a blaze of red and gold. I sent telegrams to contacts in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, Xavier explained. If there's a pattern of corruption with Deputy Marshal Dawson, we'll find evidence, and I've asked about any doctors who might have treated you. Cordelia shook her head. Edward was careful. He'd bring in a doctor from out of town when necessary, someone he paid well for discretion, and I wasn't allowed to see the same one twice. There will be records somewhere, bills, payments. Xavier's confidence was unwavering. Someone always talks eventually. And until then. Ellis won't stop looking. Then we make sure he's looking in the wrong places. I've arranged for rumors that you were seen heading toward Arizona territory. It should buy us some time. Cordelia wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the evening cooled. You've thought of everything. Not everything, Xavier admitted, but enough to get started. The rest we'll figure out as we go. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this. Xavier turned to look at her, his expression serious. You don't need to repay kindness, Miss Dawson. That's what makes it kindness. Cordelia, she corrected softly. Please call me Cordelia. Cordelia, he repeated, the name sounding different in his slow drawl. They sat in comfortable silence until the stars emerged, bright pinpricks against the velvet darkness. For the first time in years, Cordelia felt something close to peace. The next morning brought reality back in sharp focus when Miguel returned from town with news. 3 men are staying at the hotel, he reported as they gathered in the kitchen. One matches the description of Ellis Dawson. They're asking questions all over Hillsborough, offering money for information. Xavier nodded grimly. And Sheriff Morales, watching for now, he told them he hasn't seen anyone matching Miss Dawson's description, but he's under pressure to organize a search. Xavier paced the kitchen, thinking. We need to accelerate our timeline. Miguel, ride to Silver City. Find Jacob Stern, tell him I'm calling in my marker. I need everything he can dig up on Edward Dawson's business dealings and his brother's activities as deputy marshal. Miguel nodded and left immediately. Xavier turned to Cordelia. We should move you to the line cabin up in the hills. If they decide to search local ranches, that's the last place they'd look. I won't hide while you put yourself at risk, Cordelia protested. These men are dangerous. So am I when necessary, Xavier replied, his voice hardening slightly. I've spent my life dealing with men who think their power puts them above the law. I'm not about to stop now. Something in his tone made Cordelia study him more carefully. The easygoing rancher facade had slipped, revealing glimpses of the Texas Ranger he'd once been. She realized there was more to Xavier Kincaid than she'd initially understood. What happened? She asked. To make you leave the Rangers, Xavier's expression closed briefly, then he sighed. A case not unlike yours, a powerful man, a dead wife, a corrupt investigation. I knew the truth, but evidence disappeared, witnesses changed their stories, and suddenly I was the one facing charges of misconduct. What did you do? I resigned before they could discharge me, gathered what evidence I could and sent it to newspapers in 3 states. It wasn't enough for a conviction, but it was enough to ruin the man's reputation and business. He died a year later supposedly of heart failure, though rumors suggested suicide. Cordelia absorbed this, and you don't regret it, giving up your career. I regret not being able to get justice through proper channels, but no, I don't regret standing up for what was right. He paused. Which is why I'm going to help you now, but we do it my way, which means keeping you safe while I work on the legal angles. Reluctantly, Cordelia agreed. That afternoon, Xavier escorted her to the line cabin, a small but solid structure nestled in a grove of pine trees about 5 miles from the main ranch house. It had a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and basic provisions. It's not fancy, Xavier apologized, lighting the lamps as dusk approached. But it's warm and secure. It's perfect, Cordelia replied honestly. After her last 3 years of marriage in a luxurious home that had become a prison, the simple cabin felt like freedom. I'll bring supplies every other day, Xavier explained, and there's a signal system if you need help urgently. He showed her a series of mirrors positioned to catch the sun, visible from the main house. 3 quick flashes means trouble, I'll come running. As he prepared to leave, Cordelia impulsively caught his arm. Thank you. I know those words aren't enough, but they're enough, Xavier assured her, his hand briefly covering hers where it rested on his sleeve. The simple contact sent unexpected warmth through both of them. He cleared his throat. Be safe, I'll return soon. For the next 4 days, Cordelia adjusted to life in the cabin. Though isolated, she found peace in the rhythm of simple tasks, tending the fire, preparing meals from the provisions Xavier had left, even attempting to mend some clothing she found in a trunk. Her injured hand was healing well, the stitches clean and the pain reduced to a dull throb. Xavier visited as promised, bringing fresh supplies and news. The telegram responses were starting to come in, providing pieces of the puzzle. A doctor in Santa Fe remembered treating a Mrs. D for suspicious injuries. A former business partner of Edward Dawson had filed complaints about missing funds. Small threads that, woven together, might create a tapestry of truth. On the 5th day, Xavier arrived with greater urgency. Ellis Dawson and his men have started searching outlying ranches. They've got no legal authority, but they're throwing Edward's name and money around, intimidating people. How close are they? Cordelia asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Too close for comfort. They visited the Harper place yesterday, that's only 10 miles south of here. Xavier paced the small cabin. Miguel returned from Silver City with promising information, but we need more time to compile everything properly. Maybe I should just keep moving, head further west. Running will only make you look guilty, Xavier argued. We're building a case, Cordelia. A good one, but we need to keep you hidden a little longer. That night, Xavier stayed at the cabin, sleeping in a chair by the door while Cordelia took the bed. Neither slept well, both acutely aware of the other's presence in the small space. Tell me about your life before Edward, Xavier said softly into the darkness. Cordelia shifted on the narrow bed. There's not much to tell. I grew up on a small farm outside Albuquerque. My father grew vegetables and raised a few goats. My mother taught at the local school. It was simple but happy. And then the fever took them, typhoid. It swept through the area when I was 18. I was visiting an aunt in Santa Fe, which is why I was spared. Her voice caught. When I returned, they were already buried. The farm was heavily mortgaged, so I lost that too. That's when you met Edward. He was handling the bank's interests in the property. He seemed so kind at first, so understanding of my grief. He offered marriage as a solution to my problems, and I was young enough to believe that his interest was genuine. Xavier's voice hardened. Men like that are predators. They look for vulnerability. I know that now, Cordelia said quietly. But what about you? You never married. Xavier was silent for so long that Cordelia thought he might have fallen asleep. There was someone once, during my ranger days. Her father was a judge in Austin. We were engaged for a brief time. What happened? The case I told you about, the powerful man with the dead wife. Her father was presiding over the initial hearing. When I refused to back down, when I kept pushing for justice despite the political consequences, she returned my ring. Said she couldn't marry a man who would throw away his future on principle. I'm sorry, Cordelia whispered. Don't be. She showed her true character and I showed mine. Better to know before vows are exchanged. The conversation drifted into silence, but something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a recognition of shared values despite their different paths. Dawn broke with the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Xavier was instantly alert, gun drawn as he moved to the window. Stay inside, he ordered, his voice tense. It's Miguel, but he's riding hard. Something's wrong. Xavier stepped onto the small porch as Miguel reined his lathered horse to a stop. They're coming, Patron, Ellis Dawson and 5 men. They bribed one of the hands from the Harper place who saw you riding this direction. They'll be here within the hour. Xavier's mind raced through options. We're not ready yet. The evidence, Jacob Stern sent what he has, Miguel interrupted, producing a packet of papers from his saddlebag. He says it's enough to cast serious doubt, maybe enough for a sympathetic judge to dismiss charges, but not enough to guarantee justice. Xavier quickly scanned the documents, affidavits from 2 doctors who had treated Cordelia's injuries, financial records showing Edward Dawson's embezzlement from business partners, testimonies about Ellis Dawson's abuse of authority in previous cases. It's a start, Xavier muttered. But with Ellis leading the search party, Cordelia wouldn't make it to a fair hearing. He turned to find Cordelia standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. I won't let you risk everything for me. If they're coming, I should just know, Xavier cut her off. We're not surrendering. Miguel, ride to Sheriff Morales. Tell him everything, show him these papers. Explain that Ellis Dawson has no jurisdiction here and is operating outside the law. Then find Judge Wilson in town. He's no friend of corrupt officials. Tell him we need an emergency hearing. And what will you do, Patron? Xavier looked at Cordelia. We're going to lead them on a chase, buy time for the legal wheels to start turning. Within minutes, they had gathered essential supplies and were mounted on fresh horses Miguel had brought. The plan was dangerous, but simple. Lead Ellis and his men on a pursuit through the rough country Xavier knew like the back of his hand, eventually circling back toward town where Sheriff Morales, hopefully convinced by the evidence, would be waiting. Stay close to me, Xavier instructed as they rode away from the cabin. This terrain gets tricky. They rode hard for the first hour, following game trails and dry creek beds, places where tracking would be difficult. Xavier frequently looked back, gauging the distance to their pursuers, visible occasionally as dust clouds on the horizon. They're gaining, Cordelia called, her voice tight with fear. They're pushing their horses too hard. We're pacing ours. Xavier guided them up a narrow ravine. There's a mesa ahead with only one access point. We'll let them get close, then create a diversion. The mesa rose before them, a flat-topped prominence with steep sides. A single trail switchbacked up its face. At the top, Xavier quickly arranged branches and brush, soaking them with lamp oil from their supplies. When they start up the trail, I'll light this. The fire and smoke will slow them down, make them think twice about following immediately. And then what? Cordelia asked, catching her breath. There's another way down on the far side, steeper but passable if you know it. It'll put us miles ahead of them again. The plan worked perfectly. As Ellis and his men approached the base of the mesa, Xavier set the brush ablaze. The fire roared up, sending black smoke billowing into the clear sky. Through his spyglass, Xavier could see Ellis Dawson, a stocky man with a cruel set to his mouth, shouting in frustration as his path was blocked. That's him, Cordelia whispered, recognizing her brother-in-law even at a distance. The one in the black hat. He won't catch us, Xavier promised, leading her to the hidden trail on the mesa's far side. The descent was treacherous, their horses picking their way carefully down the rocky path. Once on level ground again, they rode east toward Hillsborough. The sun was beginning its westward slide when they stopped briefly at a spring to rest the horses. "We're making good time," Xavier said, refilling their canteens. "If Miguel reached town, Sheriff Morales should be reviewing the evidence by now. And if he doesn't believe it. If he sides with Ellis," Xavier's expression hardened, "then we keep riding. I've got friends in Arizona Territory, connections in California. I won't let them take you, Cordelia." She studied his face, the determination in his blue eyes, the set of his jaw. "Why are you doing all this?" "The truth, Xavier, it's more than just helping someone in trouble." Xavier was silent for a long moment, his gaze on the distant mountains. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who never deserved the hand she was dealt. I see courage in how you faced it, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe I see a chance to get right something I got wrong before. The case that ended your ranger career, partly, but it's more than that." His eyes met hers. "It's you, Cordelia. Something about you reached past all my careful boundaries. I've spent years keeping people at a distance, focusing on building my ranch, convincing myself that was enough. Then you walked into that saloon, wounded but still fighting, and everything changed." The confession hung in the air between them. Cordelia's heart raced, recognizing the truth of her own emerging feelings despite the impossible circumstances. "We should keep moving," Xavier finally said, breaking the tension. "We've still got a long ride ahead." They mounted up again, riding at a steady pace as the afternoon waned. The terrain gradually shifted from rough hills to the more open country surrounding Hillsborough. They were perhaps 5 miles from town when the sound of approaching riders came from behind them. "They found our trail," Xavier said grimly, urging his horse to greater speed. "The town's just over that ridge. If we can make it there," the crack of a rifle shot cut through his words, the bullet whistling past them. "Ride," Xavier shouted, drawing his revolver. "Don't stop for anything." Cordelia bent low over her horse's neck, urging the animal forward as more shots rang out behind them. Xavier fired back, not aiming to hit but to discourage pursuit. The ridge seemed impossibly distant as bullets kicked up dust around them. Then Cordelia's horse stumbled, a bullet grazing its flank. The animal recovered quickly, but the brief falter allowed their pursuers to gain ground. "We're not going to make it," she called to Xavier, panic rising in her throat. "Just a little farther," he encouraged, firing again. Suddenly, the thunder of approaching hooves came from the direction of town. Over the ridge appeared Sheriff Morales leading a group of mounted men, rifles ready. "That's far enough, Dawson," the sheriff shouted as the two groups converged. Ellis Dawson reined his horse to a stop, his men following suit. "This is official law business, Sheriff. This woman is wanted for murder in Albuquerque." "I've seen the evidence, Dawson." "Evidence that your brother was abusive, that his death was self-defense, that you've been covering up his crimes for years." Morales's voice carried across the distance between them. "Judge Wilson is waiting in town. He's issued a temporary restraining order preventing you from taking Miss Dawson anywhere." Ellis's face contorted with rage. "You have no authority. I have plenty of authority in my jurisdiction," Morales interrupted. "And you're in it. Now you can come peacefully to town for the hearing, or you can try something foolish. Your choice." For a tense moment, it seemed Ellis might choose violence. His hand hovered near his gun. But faced with the sheriff and his well-armed posse, even Ellis Dawson recognized the poor odds. "This isn't over," he spat, glaring at Cordelia. "Actually, it is," Xavier said, moving his horse protectively closer to hers. "Because if you ever come near her again, you'll answer to me, and I promise that's not a conversation you'll enjoy." The ride into Hillsborough was tense but uneventful. Judge Wilson had indeed convened an emergency hearing in the town hall. As a territorial judge, he had significant authority and was known for his thorough examination of evidence. For 3 hours, the judge reviewed the documents Miguel had delivered, questioned Cordelia about her marriage and Edward's death, and heard testimony from Dr. Peterson about her injuries. Xavier provided context from his ranger experience about patterns of abuse and corruption. Ellis Dawson's counterarguments grew increasingly desperate as the evidence mounted against his brother's character and his own abuse of authority. When Judge Wilson finally delivered his ruling, the room fell silent. Based on the preponderance of evidence, I find that Edward Dawson's death occurred as an act of self-defense during a violent assault. No charges are warranted against Cordelia Dawson. Furthermore, I am referring Deputy Marshal Ellis Dawson's conduct to the territorial governor for investigation. The judge fixed Ellis with a stern gaze. You are hereby ordered to cease all pursuit and harassment of Mrs. Dawson under penalty of law. The relief that washed over Cordelia was so profound that her legs nearly gave way. Xavier steadied her, his hand warm and solid against her back. It's over, he whispered. You're free. But the full meaning of freedom didn't sink in until later that evening when they sat on the porch of Xavier's ranch house, watching the stars appear. What will you do now? Xavier asked softly. Cordelia considered the question. For years, her life had been defined by survival, first the struggle after her parents' death, then the daily battle to endure Edward's abuse, and finally the desperate flight for her life. Freedom to choose her own path felt almost overwhelming. I don't know, she admitted. I have a little money what I took from Edward's desk, enough to start somewhere new, perhaps. Xavier was silent for a long moment. You could stay here, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. Hillsborough's a decent town. People would welcome you, especially now that the truth is known. And live where? Do what? You could stay here, he repeated, more firmly this time. On the ranch, we always need help with the accounts correspondence. Mrs. Ortiz could use assistance with the household. Cordelia turned to look at him, reading more in his eyes than his casual words suggested. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Kincaid? I'm offering you time, Xavier clarified. Time to heal, to decide what you want without pressure or fear pushing you in any particular direction. And if what I decide I want is here. The question slipped out before she could reconsider its implications. Xavier's gaze intensified. Then that would make me a fortunate man. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to life at the Broken Spur. Cordelia proved adept at bookkeeping, organizing Xavier's chaotic records into sensible order. She worked alongside Mrs. Ortiz in the kitchen, learning to cook the Mexican dishes the older woman specialized in. And gradually, she began to smile more, to laugh at Miguel's jokes, to relax into the safety Xavier's presence provided. For his part, Xavier found himself inventing reasons to be near the house rather than out on the range. He brought wildflowers from the hills, claiming they were for the table but watching for Cordelia's pleased reaction. He started reading aloud in the evening's books he'd collected but rarely opened, enjoying her thoughtful comments on the stories. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to New Mexico, the feelings growing between them became increasingly difficult to ignore. Yet neither spoke of them directly, both still cautious about what the future might hold. The catalyst came with the first snow of the season, a rare event in their part of New Mexico. Cordelia stood on the porch, her face alight with childlike wonder as the white flakes drifted down. It's beautiful, she breathed as Xavier joined her. It is, he agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the snow. She caught his gaze, a blush rising to her cheeks. Xavier, I've been thinking, he said suddenly. About what you said that first night in the saloon, about not deserving kindness. Cordelia looked away. I was desperate then, but you believed it, and every day since I've wanted to prove you wrong. His hand gently turned her face back toward his. Everyone deserves kindness, Cordelia, especially you, but what I feel for you now goes far beyond kindness. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, that somewhere between rescuing you and being rescued by you, I found the piece of myself I didn't know was missing. Xavier took both her hands in his. I'm saying that I want you to stay, not as an employee or a guest, but as my partner, my wife, if you'll have me. Tears filled Cordelia's eyes. You can't mean that. After everything, all my baggage, I've never meant anything more. Your past doesn't define you, Cordelia. It's your courage, your heart, your resilience that I fell in love with. I'm afraid, she whispered, though she didn't pull away. What if I don't know how to be loved properly? Then we'll learn together. Xavier's smile was tender. I'm no expert myself, but I know what I feel when I'm with you, and I know I want to feel it for the rest of my life." The snow continued to fall around them as Cordelia weighed his words against her fears. Finally, she stepped closer, her hands moving to rest against his chest. "I love you too," she admitted softly. "I tried not to. It seemed impossible that anything good could come from all that happened. But you proved me wrong about that too." Xavier's kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Cordelia responded with unexpected passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, the snow had dusted their shoulders and hair with white. "Is that a yes?" Xavier asked, his voice rough with emotion. Cordelia's smile was radiant. "Yes, to staying, to being your wife, to building something new together." They were married 2 weeks later in Hillsborough's small church with the Ortiz family and a few townspeople as witnesses. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony, taking particular pleasure in officially uniting the couple whose case had brought to light significant corruption in the territorial justice system. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Kincaid," the judge pronounced with a broad smile. As Xavier bent to claim Cordelia's lips, her arms winding around his neck, she whispered, "I still don't believe I deserve this happiness." "Then I'll just have to keep proving you wrong," Xavier promised, "every single day." Spring came early to New Mexico that year, painting the rangeland with wildflowers and fresh grass. The Broken Spur prospered under the combined management of Xavier and Cordelia, whose head for business complemented his practical ranching knowledge. On a warm evening in May, they sat on their porch swing, Cordelia nestled against Xavier's side as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. "I received a letter today," Cordelia said, her voice holding a note of wonder, "from my former neighbor in Albuquerque. Apparently, Ellis Dawson has been removed from his position. The investigation revealed extensive corruption." Xavier's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Justice comes eventually, even if it takes its time. It wouldn't have happened without you." She tilted her face up to his. "You changed everything for me, X. You changed everything for me too, Cordelia Kincaid." The name still brought a smile to his face every time he said it. The ranch was just a place before, now it's a home. As darkness settled over the land, Xavier lit the lantern beside them, its golden glow creating a warm circle of light on the porch. In the distance, coyotes began their nightly chorus, a sound that had once made Cordelia nervous but now seemed like a familiar lullaby. "Do you ever think about that night in the saloon?" she asked. "How different things might have been if you hadn't been there?" Xavier considered this. "I believe some things are meant to be, if not that night, perhaps another. Our paths were supposed to cross." "Such a romantic cowboy," she teased, though her eyes were soft with affection. "Only for you," he replied, bending to kiss her. "Always for you." As the years passed, the legend of Xavier and Cordelia Kincaid grew throughout the territory. Their ranch expanded, their reputation for fair dealing and generosity making the Broken Spur brand respected far and wide. When children came first, a son they named Thomas after Sheriff Morales, who had stood by them. Then twin daughters 3 years later, their happiness seemed complete. Yet Xavier never forgot his promise. Each morning he found some way to remind Cordelia of her worth: a wildflower on her pillow, a note in her pocket, a kiss that conveyed what words sometimes couldn't. And each night, as they lay together in the bedroom of the home they'd built together, he whispered the same words: "You deserve every happiness, my love, today and always." Eventually, Cordelia stopped protesting. The wounded young woman who had stumbled into a Hillsborough saloon believing herself unworthy of basic kindness had transformed into a confident ranch mistress, a loving mother, a respected community member. The scars remained both physical and emotional, but they had faded, becoming part of her story rather than defining it. On their 10th anniversary, Xavier surprised her with a journey to San Francisco, a city neither had visited. As they stood on a hill overlooking the bay, the salty breeze tugging at Cordelia's auburn hair now threaded with occasional silver, Xavier marveled at how far they had come. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Kincaid," he asked, arms encircling her waist from behind. Cordelia leaned back against his chest, secure in the embrace that had become her sanctuary. "I was thinking about deserving," she admitted, "about how you were right all along." "About what?" She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the lines that time had etched around his eyes, lines of laughter, of squinting into the sun, of a life fully lived. "Everyone deserves kindness, but kindness was just the beginning of what you gave me." Her voice softened. "You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me strength when I had none left. You gave me a home when I was lost." Xavier's blue eyes, still bright despite the years, held her steadily. "You gave me all those things too, Cordelia. That's what love is, a gift freely given, not because it's deserved, but because it's chosen." As the sun sank toward the Pacific, painting the water with streaks of crimson and gold, Cordelia Kincaid finally and completely believed him. The cowboy who had proved her wrong day after day had won the ultimate victory, not just saving her life, but teaching her how to truly live it. And in the end, that was the greatest kindness of all.